you doing this on StreamYard or YouTube? Because you sent me link to both.
I am doing it on StreamYard,
Yeah, sure.
and we're now live, and we can you can start asking me your challenging questions on secular Koranism now,
Well,
Tim.
first of all, I don't know much about it. I did listen to that streaming event of yours, um, uh, where you talked to a person called Dupes. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, Jupiter. Who? Yes.
Yeah, you explained some um, attributes of secular Koranism, but I don't know the entirety of it. So, do I get the impression it takes a lot of what you might call the rules or the commandments from the Quran, and
That's exactly right.
you'd apply that as a set of laws that everybody has to follow. But does
Yes.
that include what uh, an experienced person like me who doesn't know the Quran in detail, but I've heard a lot of horror stories about the unpleasant sides of the Quran.
Hmm.
Does that mean you also import what I would consider rather unpleasant ones, like a man can own a woman, a man can have several women, a man can rape a woman, things like that?
There are no such verses, but I think there is some. I mean, there are lots of misapprehensions about the Quran. I mean, people think, it's stoning to death. In fact, the Quran doesn't even mention it. So what Muslims do comes from the Hadith, which is how they have interpreted the Quran over the centuries, and they're
When you
quite
say,
attached to it.
sorry, when you say that the Hadith, who wrote the Hadith then?
Well, Muslims who interpret the Quran. There's also the Sunnah, which is basically it is a bit like the New Testament. So you have the companions of Muhammad writing about him and saying he did this, and little stories about how he was as a man.
Yeah.
And they attach too great a significance to these stories, in my view. And I'm saying, if you read the Quran, it's actually okay and fair enough. And I say this as a non-Muslim and an ex-liberal and an ex-feminist.
So the Quran itself was written by Muhammad, is that right?
No, people who don't know say that, but for Muslims, they say Muhammad only recited the words of God while in a trance.
Hmm.
And they call him the unlettered prophet, which is a good way of ensuring that people don't think that the Quran was written by him, because it would amount to, I don't know, a black cab driver coming up with the language of Shakespeare. Um, and the saying, he couldn't have written it because he just didn't have that education to compose poetry of that, literacy.
I thought there were stories that one of his wives helped him write it, and she was
Um,
more educated than him.
well, that would not be what Muslims believe, and I think really the only way of challenging any religion is to say, well, even according to your rules, you say this, but you're breaking that rule. But I don't think any Muslim would accept that Muhammad wrote the Quran in any way, because
Hmm.
they consider it a miracle of God that such a book was written at all.
Okay, so the Quran is the words transmitted from God via Muhammad, is that right?
Yes, that's the
And
narrative.
so the entirety of the Quran, are you saying it does not include what people like me of the West regard as rather unpleasant sides of Islamism, which is, as I said, treating women in an appalling way, um, uh, sanctioning physical violence, even killing apostates, and similarly,
If you will
treating.
go through one list, I mean, one by one, because I won't remember, the whole list that you brought, and I kind of want to stop you here because I think before that you were saying, um, well, I can't remember what you said, a few minutes ago about which things that you said came from the Quran, but I remember, obviously I'm saying it is not even contained in the Quran.
Mhm.
But the worst one, which you mentioned, was the wife beating verse, and that's actually in the Quran. So I don't mind talking about that one, because I
Sure.
think that would be the one that women would most be concerned about. So basically, it's a kind of phased rebuke, in that the husband is told to admonish the woman for whatever she's done that he thinks unsatisfactory, and if that doesn't work, he is to um, separate himself from her, i.e., sleep in different rooms, withhold sex from her, and finally, he is allowed to strike her.
And is the woman allowed to do that to her husband as well?
No, well, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. But I would like to give you my interpretation of that verse. And I'm saying it actually wouldn't result in violence to the woman if interpreted in the way that I propose. So, say you have a wife and she never cleans the house and goes clubbing, and when you come home after a hot day's work, she leaves you with the kids, or something insufferable like that, and you admonish her, it doesn't work. You sleep in the spare room, or make her sleep in the spare room, it doesn't work, and finally you can't bear it anymore. So instead of striking her, you would invite your friends and family to witness a wife beating ceremony for your own protection, because you don't want to, hit her so badly.
Okay, you do
She
realise
really.
that someone like myself finds that quite unpleasant and unacceptable.
I know, but may I finish my explanation?
Sure, yeah, please do.
And so, but you will be protected, because there will be people around, and obviously listening to hear both sides of the story, and you tell the assembled guests of her terrible behavior, and if she has any defense, she is allowed to say, it ain't what you said, you got it all wrong, you're telling lies, or whatever it is. But it would be friends and family who know that, the married couple, and you finish your bit, she has a story, and all you have to do is smack her on the wrist to complete this formal process, and if she doesn't improve afterwards, you can proceed straight to divorce without further ado, and that will be the end of the story. There is no need to give her a black eye, or knock her about.
But it's I mean, I still find that extreme. And as I said, surely it would be fair if the woman can do that to the man in return if he behaves in an appalling way.
Well, the thing is, that it's part of feminine privilege to be given so many chances, because I think a woman, if she thinks a man is, hasn't done what he's supposed to do, she can proceed straight to divorce without these, more. These would be just sort of further steps to take before divorce is possible. So she can say, well, you haven't been bringing home the bacon. I'm off. I'm, going home to my parents, or whatever she wants to do. I mean, she doesn't have to say, now I have to do this, and if you don't improve, I have to do that, and then finally I have to do this thing. It's like, she can get a divorce more quickly than the man can.
Okay, that's fine. The woman does. You're saying that in the Quran, the woman can divorce without the permission of her husband or her family. She can independently divorce her husband, can she? Because
Under
my
my
understanding is that that's not allowed, isn't in Islam?
well, secular Koranism is different to their kind of Islam, but even according to their kind of Islam, they treat marriage as a contract. So they will have to agree on a nikah, which is what they call a marriage contract, and this means that the idea of no fault divorce is abolished, because if marriage is a contract, then divorce must be breach of contract. And through this understanding of marriage under these terms, no fault divorce will be abolished. And I think this will please many men.
So I presume justification for divorce would include the man or the woman being unfaithful, or the man beating his wife, things like that.
Yes, the usual, behaviour that exists under, UK law. Irretrievable. Well, irretrievable breakdown. I mean, it has to be specified. Which contract, was broken, which term of people will have different assumptions of what, what is reasonable and what is unreasonable. But the point of this is really to make marriage a good bargain for men again. So that men think, well, if I marry her, I won't be stuck with her and have to put up with her terrible behaviour. And if I can't put up with it, she'll divorce me and get half my stuff, which is what actually discourages a lot of men from marrying.
Okay, so you've defined a separate pathway for a man who's dissatisfied with his wife that may lead to divorce, and another pathway for a woman who may be dissatisfied with her husband. They're both the same, except for the one bit where the man is allowed to hit the woman and not the other way around. So surely, if secular Koranism was being fair to both of those humans, regardless of their gender, they should both have the ability either to hit the other, or really, neither should have the ability to hit the other. What do you
Well,
think?
I've explained that, in a way, this privileges the woman in that it will be harder for the man to divorce her because he's got to go through all these phases. And I've also explained that the violence need not be anything that would hurt her.
No, we need
It
not.
would be
But
symbolic.
he's still
The
granted
chastisement would be
he's
symbolic.
given a privilege that the woman. Well, I won't call it privilege. I think it's an unpleasant, you know, right that the woman doesn't have, which is to inflict violence. I know you're saying that it might be a gentle admonishment on the wrist, but even so, it's still violence. But it seems unfair that the man is allowed to do that and the woman isn't.
Well, if the man is the one who is providing and protecting, I mean that is part of the verse that explains the process of this sort of three-stage rebuke, which could be equated as, in employment terms, as a verbal warning, a written warning, and a final warning, which means that he can't just kick her out, the moment she annoys him. And divorce is also a kind of staged process. It says there is a waiting period in which the terms of the contract might be renegotiated, the terms varied, and if that's not possible, then the marriage ends. So it is quite a legalistic process, but I think, and because of that, it lends itself to becoming law, and that would actually protect the parties because they would
I still
know
find this
their
very
rights.
unfair to the woman, to be
Okay,
honest.
well, I'm saying I'm a
So we
woman,
have to
and
agree to
I
disagree
think
on
it's
this one.
okay. I think it's fair enough, because the woman would have the I guess because she has had she has three warnings more than a man, basically. If she
Yeah,
misbehaves.
but she could theoretically suffer some violence, whereas a man doesn't. I mean, I find that anyway. I think we'll have to agree to disagree because I think it sounds like you're not going to be moved on this thing. Could you explain more about secular Quranism? Because I don't know what the other rules of the Quran are that bind Islamic society. I mean, do they have say something similar to the Ten Commandments, or presumably they've incorporated the Ten Commandments, and do they embellish on that? And
Um, well, I suppose the usual ones of you may have heard of would be the banning of usury, which actually would suit a lot of individuals and government who are over their heads in debt, which means that they can default on their loans. And this would make property prices more affordable.
it also crashed the financial system in the West.
And yes, and that would be a splendid opportunity to rebase it on a different system.
No, I think it would create ruin, and and destroy the fabric of the West. If everybody is at the same time defaults on their loans, it'll create a crisis, an absolute crisis. That'll be very unpleasant. Okay, let's move on from that. Okay, you tell me about the relationships between men and women in a marriage. What about courts of law, and what about democracy? You're saying there'll be one autocratic. It's a theocracy and a one-party state. You're saying. So how do we determine who is a leader, and how do we have protections to stop that leader turning into a Hitler or Stalin?
Yes, it would be run. You probably won't approve of this, but I mean, the Chinese Communist Party is, the best known one, and I don't think there is one that. Well, I can't think of any. I mean, Iran has a different system, but it has elections. So I think the only model we have is the Soviet system or the Chinese Communist Party, and I've had a look at how they run things, and they do have a hierarchy of central committee, the Politburo Standing Committee, and the Politburo, which is with fewer and fewer people until you get to the top, and they have odd numbers. So I think actually China must be doing something right for the West to be looking over its shoulder, afraid that China is catching up. I think that China is actually quite rationally governed. It doesn't. It's not in hoc to its corporate, to its business classes, who have no opportunity to divide the political classes with their campaign funding. So leaving the only party allowed in the country to be able to govern in the national interest and have discussions about how they do it. And I've read a few books about that. There's a Canadian called Daniel Bell who now lives there, and he writes admiringly of the system, saying it is wonderful that the Chinese can talk of governing in the national interest and even talk of governing in the interests of future generations as yet unborn.
I presume that Daniel Bell is a well-off middle-class person, and he's not one of the slave workers working in an apple factory in China with very little.
He's an academic. He's a Canadian
microscopic wage.
He's a Canadian academic who takes an interest in I guess political science, but anyway, he lives there now and teaches at the Tsinghua University. I think the last time I realized this. I don't know if you visited China. Have you visited China?
No. Have you?
Okay, I have, and I think there is a sizable British expat community there who do quite well for themselves, and
yes, but
rather
again,
like it there.
They'll be well-off middle classes. They won't be like the workers, the factory workers at the base of society, who probably suffer very bad conditions. And you do hear about conditions in some of these factories that are exporting billions of dollars worth of goods to the West that are unpleasant. And
the Chinese seem quite happy with their government, whatever propaganda that we might be fed.
You don't know that.
I have been there. People seem enterprising and happy enough.
Conduct a poll across all.
They have conducted a poll. They have conducted a poll, and I think the satisfaction rates are sort of 90%. It's quite high, and they're conducted by Western agencies. So if you do look that up, you will see that.
I'm sorry, but I distrust the Chinese Communist Party very much.
I understand, but obviously there will be two views, and you will favour one and I the other.
Yeah, I'm not happy about any country being governed by a regime like the Chinese Communist Party. Essentially the lack of democracy, the lack of a decent opposition that holds the ruling party to account, things like that. And a one-party state, I think, is bad, seriously bad. Because
May
it
I
allows
point?
people. Okay, let's look at the recent leaders of one-party states: Hitler, Stalin, Pol
Okay,
Pot,
I know
Kim
that you
Jong
will be
Un.
thinking of those, but as far as China is concerned, I would like to point out that China voluntarily gave up communism and became capitalist without a revolution, and so it is capable of change. And
Yeah, I
and
agree.
Westerners
They
have said
clearly.
that it might have a one-party state, but they are capable of changing its policies. But while the West may have its different parties, but never change its policies.
No, I agree. The Chinese Communist Party, clue in the name, communist, very cleverly wove capitalism aspects, small aspects of capitalism, into the reforms that make modern China that we see today, and that has benefited them in that they're creating these factories, many of them um, staffed by seriously underpaid workers, churning out lots of cheap goods for the West to consume, and many people in China, including the large emerging middle class in China, I agree with you there, are benefiting strongly from it. But essentially, they still have many elements of communism and a communist single party state. It's not a capitalist country. It's got aspects of capitalism in the way they manufacture and sell goods to the West. But they probably don't have a proper free market within China unless it suits the Chinese Communist Party.
Washington wasn't that keen on political parties. I don't know if you've ever read his farewell speech, which is read out in February, every February in the Senate. Um, what he says
Well,
about
sorry,
political parties is quite
can I just
telling.
say he was, yeah, Washington was a great man from America's point of view, but he wasn't that experienced politically in an established multi-party democracy like England was.
He
He, George,
disapproved of the party system, and he was right, in my view, to disapprove of it.
well, I think you can't have democracy without more than one party.
No,
And
you can have direct democracy, which is what ancient
I
Athens
agree.
had.
Yeah, I agree. And my preferred democratic model is what the Swiss have, which is uh, virtually the senior leaders, the political leaders in Switzerland, aren't known by all the people because most of the decisions, the important decisions, are made by referenda. And these referenda are allowed to be tabled if you get a petition signed by a quorum, like number which I think is something like 100,000 or something like that. So if 100,000 Swiss citizens sign a petition saying we want to ban this law or we want to establish this new law, then it'll be put as a national referendum so all the Swiss citizens can vote on it, not the politicians. And that's
They
the
have an
kind of
immigration
democracy I
problem
like.
too,
That's the
don't
kind of
they?
direct democracy that I favour. And as you
They
saw in
have they have a
Brexit,
problem with immigration too. So their system has also been subverted.
who Switzerland?
Yes, I remember they had some referendum about
Yeah,
not
they
not
did.
having any
They
more
did.
mosques, which suggests there must be quite a few Muslims for them to object to.
Oh, I
So
thought they had a
they
referendum on.
have somehow been I don't know, well, made to endure the immigration that the rest of the West has had to suffer.
I don't know about that, but I know the Swiss had a referendum recently about immigration, and the Swiss voted to try and reduce immigration in the referendum. But I can't remember how it proceeded after that. But the Swiss, I think, are the most democratic country in the world. And as you say, the ancient Greek model was very good because normal citizens could stand up in their local parliament and have their say. But obviously, that's because it was a small country and it was workable. But
But
right
in the
now,
end,
right now, we yeah, I agree. Western democracy is not good in that we have these same tribes of people in charge of all parties who think similarly and think completely dissimilarly to the normal electorate. But I think that's bad, but that doesn't justify going to a one-party state and a theocracy. I don't
Well,
think.
as far as Athens was concerned, it was found that they kept voting for more war until Athens exhausted itself in its wars against Sparta. And also, democracy didn't last very long in Athens. The Romans had a kind of democracy too, but it couldn't survive the
emperors.
the empire, the Roman Empire, because really the balance of power that was achieved in Republican Rome was really, a fair deal between the patricians and the plebs. So, I mean, I think we know that when the plebs were not happy with the deal that they got, they would just leave the city, leaving the patricians to, I guess, clean their own toilets or whatever, and then eventually they would come back. But there would still be, some kind of, a relationship between the patricians and the plebs. It was only when Rome acquired all the, its territories, its empire, that it was just obvious to get slaves in. And that severed the relationship between the patricians and the plebeians, and it could be said that what we have now in the West is in a way similar to what the Romans did. I mean, we even have the bread and circuses that the Romans did to keep us quiet, to distract us from reflecting on our lot, and obviously, if the working classes no longer have a role in society, they would get degenerate. To the extent that they declined to have more children or have enough or bring them up properly enough for them to want to join the Roman army, and that was the beginning of the end of the Roman Empire.
I don't know. I think there are more causes than that brought down the end of the empire, but it took a long time. It was a very slow decline. But yeah. Okay, going back to your theocratic single-party state, I'm still very unhappy about it. I still think the lack of an opposition party is bad. I think that you're obviously going to have a hierarchy composed of almost a self-selected group of people who will be the bosses, and it'll be very difficult to introduce new blood into that top level of the hierarchy to bring better ideas into how the country is governed. Also, I think it's very likely to lead to an authoritarian dictatorship, as I said, like Pol Pot, Hitler, Stalin, etc.
I understand your concerns, and I propose to introduce something that I don't think the Chinese Communist Party have, and it is this: a administrative court to ensure that people who get expelled from the party are expelled for proper reasons, because it's only too easy for our different political parties in the West to expel its members. I know that the Conservative Party, or the secretary of the board of the Conservative Party has absolute discretion to expel any member for any reason, and this is what they often do to people whose views they dislike. They can get rid of you without having to give a reason, in effect. And if you want to sue them, you would have to sue them in contract, and that's difficult. And the courts have traditionally not wanted to make a decision on any of that sort of thing. And this makes it very difficult for any member of any political party to get justice. And to this end, I propose that the political party, the only party in the land, should be subject to judicial review.
Yes,
and this was actually what was proposed in India, but somehow it got shelved.
Who appoints the judges? It'll be that same clique at the top. It'll be a self-serving system. there'll be no new blood. There'll be no light shone on their workings, and there'll be no accountability, and there'll be no. It'll be very difficult for an alternative opinion to be voiced.
Well,
Come on, Claire. Surely you see that. All right.
I
Look, I understand. I understand the driving force behind this. I think I understand from your point of view. I think you really hate what you call the matriarchy, and I won't say we are on a complete matriarchy, but I completely understand what you say in that we are governed by a ruling class that are terrified of offending women, and that women are given more power than men in many respects. And I myself have personally experienced that in the way my children. I'll tell you about that privately later. Um, yeah, I completely understand the appalling abuse of power that some women can exercise over men, especially with regards to bringing up children. And
Mhm.
that's bad, and that should be stopped. We should be a completely egalitarian society where men have the same rights as women over bringing up the children, and we shouldn't enable women to completely destroy a man's life when they divorce if that woman feels that she wants to take revenge on him.
Mhm.
And right now, the law in this country and most of the West allows women to have vindictive power in being able to destroy a man's life and destroy his soul, especially with regards to giving him access to the kids. I
Mhm.
agree with you in that respect, and there has to be a way to, you know, stop that happening. But I think a one-party theocratic state based on Quran law is excessive, in my opinion. If you don't mind my saying so.
No, not at all.
I
I'm.
think I think you can create not a secular Koranism, but a secular sensible adoption of Christian values, which most of us have in this country. You know, it's been embedded in our culture for centuries. We naturally behave in a way that is Christian, where we're charitable. A lot of us, we always assume someone is telling the truth before before we suspect that they might be telling a lie. We show hospitality to foreigners coming to this country, and I think that's worked very well. But it's been abused by many exploitative classes, and I think maybe the natural Christianity that is extant in Britain and America and Europe works very well. It's not codified because everybody assumes you're not going to murder your neighbor unless you're a real nutter. You know, if somebody falls over in the street, you will try and help them get up. I think that's a natural thing, and a lot of that is a consequence of the Christianity that's been extant in our cultures, you know, for thousands of years. Whereas other countries with a different kind of religious background, let's take India, different religions, mostly Hindu. Um, yes, they're wonderful people. I work with a huge team of Indians, and they're wonderful people. I like them very much. But you keep reading of horrific stories where there seems to be a harshness that a Christian reared person like myself finds quite strange and horrible to see, where someone falls over in the street and dies, and no one goes to see if they're okay. It's almost as
Mm.
if they think life is not worth giving regard. Maybe they're fatalists. I don't know what it is in their culture that makes them behave like that. Also, you keep reading horrific stories of women being treated appallingly by people in India and Pakistan and places like that don't have a Christian background. And it makes you think maybe we in the West have been lucky to have that Christian background to give us what we might regard as a better moral fabric to our society, albeit it's not codified in law, but you just know and expect most people in your country will behave with that kind of Christian
I know,
charity.
but people going to church is a middle class preoccupation, if
No,
at
no, no. Yeah,
all.
I'm not talking about being actively religious and going to church. I'm talking about the background to our society
I
is
know, but you can't assume it now because not many people share it. I can hardly find a believing Christian to talk to.
I'm Claire. I'm not talking about. I'm not religiously, I don't religiously attend church anymore. Okay, but I still have those Christian values in me,
But
and
they need
my
to be
children.
reinforced.
No,
You know,
it
it
is
can't be
reinforced.
just I'm going to church and
It's
therefore I'm a good
reinforced. No,
person.
it's reinforced in all sorts of subtle ways.
How?
Because, okay, when I brought up my children, they hardly went to church. Okay, I brought them up with the Christian values that I was brought up with. Okay,
But most children grow up in fatherless homes, and if you're not going to stop that,
no, Claire. Not most children grow up in fatherless homes.
it's
A lot.
actually a statistical fact. I can find you. You know, it's like more than half of children born in this country are born out of wedlock.
Out of wedlock doesn't mean they're fatherless.
But they're more
Okay,
likely
my
to be
children,
fatherless. They're more likely to break up than
my
married
children are
couples.
born. My children are born out of wedlock, and I made sure I stuck around despite a lot of hostility I had from my partner. It was quite horrendous at times, but I made sure I stuck around to make sure they are brought up correctly and that they had myself and their mother to be there for them. And I did that for 13 years, and then I became a single parent of them. When
I'm
some,
sorry to hear about well, your breakup, but I think it's statistically proven that you're more likely to stay together if you were married in the first place. That is the thing, because it's like both parties have decided to tie the knot together, and people witness their wedding, and they're going to be a bit more shy of just saying, it didn't work out, I'm off,
I agree with that
because
point. I agree with that point, but also there's another point, and maybe you would agree with me here, in that the over feminization of the legal structure in our country allows women to have more rights legally than the man. So that, I think, has made a lot of men think, oh, if I marry that lady, even though I love her, even though I want to spend the rest of my life with her and have a family with her, if I marry her and she has access to more powerful legal powers than I do as a man, I
and
think,
she's more likely to be believed.
yeah, exactly. I'll
Yeah.
just I'll just live with her rather than marry her. And I think a lot of men have done that for that reason.
Yes, and this will lead to a
But
culture
but but
of
but
women finding it hard to become a married mother, which means that they will have illegitimate offspring, and this means more fatherless homes and more criminality, and all the bad stuff of immigration that
yes, that's
you
the
are
other
complaining of.
Claire. That's the other extreme of the non-married family. I think a lot, I would say, a substantial number of the unmarried families are, like I suggest, they will stay together. They are staying together for the sake of bringing up the kids in a stable home, albeit they're not married. Yeah, I agree that if you're not married, you're more likely to divorce, sure. But, and of course, there is that extreme end of the spectrum where there are an awful lot of single parent families where the children are out of control because the mother has to strive to bring up the children by herself and without a man there to help her. And the other way around, if a man was bringing up children, because I was a single parent of two teenagers, it was really stressful sometimes because you would try to, you know, impose some kind of order, tell them, like, come on, you can't do that, boys. And with some mouthy teenagers, you feel surrounded, you feel alone. And I do understand why single parent families find it hard and they allow, not through design, a lot of them, but because they run out of energy, they allow their boys to go out of control. I didn't. We made it work, myself and my boys. But I could see those points where if I'd been weaker, that family would have collapsed. I could have relented and let them do stupid things and get into trouble, but I didn't. But
Mm.
I agree, single parent families are horrible for the single parent in a lot of the times. And I think, yeah, I don't know a good solution apart from, as you say, strengthening the law.
Chapter 24, verse 2, I'm afraid. Prevention is better than cure. I mean,
I
nothing else short of that would work now, because, the culture is so ingrained that there are actually more unmarried parents than there are married parents. So, unless you say, well, that's got to stop, and, we're going to stop it and we'll remind you, but that it isn't allowed, because it does say in that verse that the punishment has to be public and there has to be witnesses to reinforce the message that it's not going to be allowed anymore. And that is really, I think, the hardest thing to accept. I do understand. Because a lot of people, a lot of men who, okay, they may not even be sexually active, they may not even be morally compromised themselves, but they don't want to say these things because it will just get other men who are morally compromised to be angry with them, so they don't go there. And so the problem will continue. I mean, all these sort of stabbings in London and elsewhere, the delivering drugs. What was it? County lines or whatever.
County lines, yeah.
Yeah. Obviously these children are not from, happy, well-run homes. And they will be the ones who stab and get stabbed, as they conduct their criminal, delinquent lives. And nobody cares until it happens to somebody close to them, or it actually happens to them. And we are all, turning the other, well, not turning the other cheek, I'm looking the other way. So,
well, I think we can solve that problem without a theocratic, single-party, secular Koranist state. I think we can solve that just by
how do you propose to do it?
Removing benefits from families where one of their children stabs someone.
We won't even get to the stage of saying the little that you are saying. You know that Boris is nowhere near saying anything like that. Or the Labour Party, or the Lib Dems, or UKIP.
But there's no way that anybody wouldn't implement your secular Koranism as
but in a way, it doesn't even matter, because at least I make the point that this is what is necessary, but which makes it more likely that people will do what is necessary. But if you're not going to say what it is necessary to do, then you will be further away from doing the necessary thing.
I think if you started a party that said we're going to remove the destruction of our society because of single-parent families, especially those that go wayward, we will stop benefits for anybody who has a child who stabs somebody. We will also stop benefits to allow anybody to have a child while they're still on benefits.
Yes, but this is all pie in the sky, in the sense that, okay.
Well, I know the modern Tory party, being full of a bunch of useless wusses, won't pass any law like that.
They will never do anything like that. So if you're not even going to get the little that you ask for, you might as well just be hanged for a sheep as a lamb, right? That's
I'm getting for allowing a single-party theocratic state.
Yeah, but because okay, so
no,
people
I'm not.
Say it's a rhetorical device to frighten people. Yes, it is meant to frighten people.
Of how I think a good society should be run. I could never accept such a thing. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean that's fine. I think a lot of people have a certain inhibition about saying these things. I do understand, but it's not like it hasn't been done in Europe or in America before, because colonial America, in fact, inflicted.
You told me they had a wife-beating law or an adultery law that allowed the wife to be punished. But again, it's anti-woman.
Well, actually, the wives would sort of. I'm sure they would hit husbands, but the husbands would, know better than to complain. Things get thrown, don't they? I'm sure in domestic disputes there might be a bit of pushing going on and the throwing of things.
Yes, but it's not sanctioned by law. It's private within the home. That the government, the state,
people make jokes about women walking into doors. I mean, Andy Cap. I'm old enough to remember the Andy Cap cartoons.
Yeah.
With Flo getting her black eyes.
Yeah, that's appalling. That I completely object to that kind of behaviour.
Yes, and I don't know if you've seen Bringing Up Father, I think.
No, no.
Well, it's an American one, but anyway, the wife is always threatening her husband with a rolling pin.
Yeah, again, but that's in the privacy of their home. It's not sanctioned by any theocratic law or anything.
No, no, but you see, the thing, the fact that it is regulated, okay, we're talking here about, oh, the horror of regulated wife beating. And we think it's horrible, but actually it just means that, the wife will not do this thing, because it will be embarrassing for her, because, even if you don't hit her, you have to call all the people who attended the wedding to come to the house to hear your accusation against it. And it's also embarrassing for the husband, right? I married this terrible woman, and she's not even, doing the little she should be doing as a wife. It's all extremely embarrassing. But the point is that, for a man, there is a way out. It's like, in theory, you have to go through all these procedures, and then you can divorce her if she doesn't improve. So, there's a way out. And for, being afraid
Claire,
of...
you're being sexist. I'm winking here slightly. You're being sexist. You're constantly concentrating on the man's path to a resolution of a problem. You're not thinking about the woman. Quite often, and I really hope it's not.
I'm talking to you, and the chat is masculine, I'm afraid. I don't think there are any women listening to this.
The woman suffers problems in a relationship, and sometimes she's completely trapped and oppressed by a husband. And from what you're telling me, that doesn't give her much succor.
Well, it is okay. How this would help women is that there will be more men prepared to marry, because they think they're not, they don't think it's walking into a trap that will deprive them of half their property. So they're more likely to marry, and this would be a service to women who want to become married mothers, because that is what patriarchy has to offer to women, that there will be more marriageable men whom they can
hang
choose
about your
to
idea of
marry.
patriarchy is that the man always has rule over the woman. Is that it, or have I misinterpreted what you're proposing?
It will give men the appearance of greater control over women, and I think they need this in order to do what they need to do, like run society. But if men are so afraid of women that they dare not even object to their latest insane proposal, then society will continue to suffer, and go down this what's the word? Well, hit the bottom in a vicious circle of vice and denial and fear of challenging the insanity of the matriarchy. Because what happens in a matriarchy, okay, I mean, forget the violence against women and all that. You see, basically, the way a patriarchy is organized is that there is accountability, that there is somebody at the top, even if it's a dictator, okay, even if it's an absolute monarch, he's ultimately responsible. But in this crazy system, everybody is passing the buck. You can't expect, well, Boris to be here in the next 5 years, because it will be somebody else, and then time will begin for him to fail, but before people can really, get up the courage to challenge him and whatever, there'll be some honeymoon period, and nobody takes any responsibility, and problems are never solved. Because they just, they will hide the failure of education, because people want to think that things are being run okay, but actually, I don't think education has improved. Do you?
No,
And it will never improve. It will never improve under this system, because the education is so bad that it can't be fixed in a term of office. It won't be. 4 years is not enough to solve all the terrible things that have happened.
And you've got the education blob in the civil service that Michael Gove fought very hard to defeat, and they just completely overruled him in the end. Yeah.
Yes,
But
so it'll never be, and it will just get stupider and more degenerate, and need more foreign labour, and yeah, that will just keep happening.
Yeah, but Claire, in your theocratic state, you will have the same civil servants implementing the same crap policies, because the civil servants control the flavour and the flow of how an MP's policy is
Indeed.
implemented. And
Of
quite
course,
often it'll start with a good intention at the top from the cabinet, and then by the time the civil servants hack it to bits and corrupt it, it's almost
which is
been
why the
opposite.
rules have to be changed formally. It can't be, let's just pretend everything's okay, but secretly, quietly change things from behind the scenes. You actually have to say, oops, we made a mistake. This is all wrong. And we're going to draw a line under it. It can't be,
But your theocratic state isn't going to change that. But this is a
yes, it will change because it'll change the entire culture. Because to go
you're
from
going to sack all the civil servants and
no,
employ
maybe you don't
theocratic
even have
civil
to sack
servants.
them. You just have to say the rules are going to be different now because of all the problems that were caused by the rules being the wrong rules in the first place, and we know what you did to stop
But you're going to have to employ
conservatives from getting their way.
hang about to do that policing of the civil servants. You've got to employ more civil servants, and those civil servants will be
They can be
probably of a
self-policing.
similar political complexion as the civil servants you're trying to govern. And you're just basically you're just expanding the blob with more, clones of the blob, if you see what I mean.
Well, I mean, you say that, but obviously the culture needs to be changed, and the culture can only be changed by the rules changing, and that's why the rules are so important, and that's why they're so controversial, because all political activism is about changing the rules. And if we don't admit that, we don't understand politics, because it's always about the rules. And people don't want to talk about the rules because it's so cold and well actually women don't like it because it's a very masculine way of solving problems, and women just like the sort of my feelings and does it feel good and whatever, and that is essentially the problem. I think a lot of men don't acknowledge that the problem of different styles of solving problems.
Aren't you being a bit generic about women there, Claire?
I'm not. I'm making a generalization, obviously, but why is it mostly men? Because the men instinctively see that it is about changing the rules, and women will be offended by the very idea of changing the rules.
And so,
and that's why most of them are beyond reason, because they won't even talk to me. And these men, they can hate my idea, but they'll still come and talk and challenge me, because, well, it's their way of solving problems. But women just, go, oh, you said this thing, you must be evil. We will disengage from you and never speak to you, and tell all our friends not to speak to you either. And that's how they deal with things.
To be fair, Claire, that's not just women who behave like that. That's
Men are doing that
in
now.
general. But not all
Men do
women are
that
like
too much now.
There's still a lot of strong women in this country that won't behave like that. Yeah, I know quite a lot do, but there's still a lot of women who are independent-minded and strong who won't behave like that.
Well,
That's why
name one. I'd like to get to know her. I mean, it will be somebody who's already retired, who has boomer tech issues, who hates the idea of the internet, or may just go on Facebook and nothing else. I mean, that is really the problem.
May I ask you a question, Claire?
Please do.
I don't want to pry into your personal life, but what is your sort of social circle? What kind of social classes have you, socialized with?
Middle class.
Okay. Sort of. Okay. And I got friendly. I'm middle class. I went to a private school. But when I lived in South London, when I was bringing up my boys and my ex-wife, we met a group of people at the school gate, and we got on very well, and we formed a really good social circle. But they were all what you might call working class, and I was the only middle class person there. And I like to think I'm more in tune to the working class than a lot of people, and I got on very well with them. But have you actually socialized with working class people?
Yes, of course I do. When I was in the BNP.
Well, that's different. Come on, that's political activists. I was a member of the Tory party, and yes, I socialised with the Tory, late blue, well, not blue rinse, but slightly elderly ladies, and
Mhm,
very few young people. In fact, when I joined the Tories in 2005, I was the second youngest person in the association. That was in Croydon.
mhm.
But I wouldn't call that a typical cross section of society, just like I wouldn't call the BNP a typical cross section of society.
Okay. But it's a lower middle classes who join these anti-immigration parties because they are the ones most affected,
Yeah,
and
I
it
agree. I
becomes
agree.
this kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
middle class smug thing. It's like, oh, we wouldn't even know anybody who thinks like that because
yeah,
these dreadful deplorables, we just wouldn't know such people.
yeah.
We
The
make it a
Brexit
point of
voters.
pride not to understand them.
Yeah, the Brexit voters and Trump voters, aren't they terrible and deplorable? But do you know what? Those two votes probably wouldn't have happened under your theocratic, secular Quranic state. That's
I
my
don't know
proposal.
why you would say that because the
Because they
Bible
wouldn't
and
be
the
allowed to
Quran.
vote, number one. Number two, the establishment would have been people by the likes of Cameron, Osborne, Blair. I bet you even Blair would become a mullah in your theocracy.
Well,
And
no,
he would find a way of worming his way into that
there
establishment.
will always be subversives in
So I
any
do not want a
system.
theocratic state that has Blair as part of the hierarchy.
Well, it won't be Blair because he'll
No,
be dead
I
and
can see
gone
him
if
doing
it
it.
ever happens. But of course, there will be slippery, slimy, smarmy characters in any generation wanting power and influence, and we have to be vigilant and know to spot a snake oil salesman when we see one. But unfortunately, because of the way everything is organized, the best people we don't get the best people in our political establishment, do we? We,
Oh
we,
no,
we
no.
we just get chancers and snake
Yep,
oil salesmen, people
exactly.
who
Yeah.
have no principles. And what I think is the fundamental problem is that it's not just the ruling classes who have no principles. The people at the bottom have no principles, and I think it's a failure of our moral system. And what is our moral system? It's supposed to be Christianity, but well, do people
Well,
even
may I
know what
disagree?
it means these
May I
days?
strongly disagree with you there? I think if you went out on the street and did a test like drop a £5 note or something like that, I think you find the majority of people would respond in a moral way. That's my
Which
proposal.
part of London? Which city? Which village? Which town?
Okay, not Hampstead, obviously, or Notting Hill. Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, my feeling is that there's a natural fairness in the majority of people. As I said, if they saw someone fall over, they'll pick them up. And I think
Yes.
that happens in the West more so than it does in the rest of
And
the
we
world.
need to preserve the good part of it before it all goes savage.
I agree, I agree. But I
Because
don't
people
think
go bad when they
I
see
don't think a
that being
Quranic.
good does not reward them. They
No, I
go
think
bad when they see good not being rewarded, but evil being rewarded, because
yeah,
they don't want to think of themselves as stupid. And that's why it's so important that the law should encourage good behavior and discourage bad behavior. And what would happen to your society if it encouraged bad behavior and discouraged good behavior, which I think is what is happening now.
yeah. I think what we should do is not have a new overbearing theocratic state. I think we should have a much more minimalized state where the state does not have as much power, does not have so many nannying, out of touch Tory tossers giving us nudge policies that tell us, oh, you mustn't eat this, you mustn't smoke that, you mustn't do that. Tell them to bugger off. We want to live our lives without nannying stupid, out of touch, middle class idiots.
Nannying is a feminine instinct, you know.
Okay, good
It
point.
is. I'm
I
saying
know, good
these are
point.
the consequences of matriarchy. So you need to say what it is, and people need to talk about the matriarchy, and it will trigger the,
Come
the,
on,
the chattering
okay,
classes.
uh, good point. Funny, but when I said nannying, you knew I didn't mean just the feminist, the feminine side of nannying. I meant basically hectoring. hectoring, interfering, idiot middle-class tossers. Anyway.
These things tend to be led by women, people who want to, ban smoking and, that sort of thing.
Yep, Claire Perry, good example.
I've forgotten who she is now. Who is this Claire Perry?
She was a hectoring Tory MP. I don't know if she's still in Parliament, but she kept coming out with, ridiculous nannying statements like, "Oh,
banning fox hunting. That's another thing. Where did it come from? I think it came from.
No, it came from male Labour MPs, Claire, not female.
Okay, that was class hatred, wasn't it? That was really class
precisely.
hatred.
It was purely about class hatred. In fact, I went on the countryside, there was a Countryside Alliance march in about 2002 or something. I went on that. There were 1 million people on that march. Obviously, it didn't change Labour's policy. Protests don't really work.
Yeah, and I remember.
I suppose they do give some visibility to opposition, though. So I'm in two minds about it, to be honest.
Well, I noticed that the BNP's totally conflicted position, because on the one hand, it was an English tradition and an English countryside tradition, and I thought it was like, well, they haven't got that much to do in the countryside. Why can't you let them enjoy their hunting? It's not just the toffs riding and jumping over hedges and all that. They the peasants actually enjoy it because they're part of the thing in a way, but city dwellers thought they had the right to ban country sports, and nobody cared.
Well, I think you put your finger on a major problem in our society is that we're governed by the metropolitan left. They have a lot of the Marxist left-wing principles, but they got none of the old-fashioned supporting the workers principles. In fact, they despise the workers. In fact, all three parties despise the working class. That's why.
And the lower middle classes. They hate the lower middle classes too.
Oh yeah, I consider myself lower middle class in terms of my income and also my attitude. I despise the upper middle class, like the Camerons, Osbornes, Borises. I completely nutty despise them. I'll also tell you, when I was a member of the Tory party, I met many Tory people, a lot of really good, normal, salt of the earth, lower, what you might call lower middle class people. Got on great. I appreciated their attitude. They had a decent attitude to society and why they felt they were working for the Tory party. But there was quite a large group at the top who were real posh Tories, and they were arrogant as, I'm going to swear, arrogant as fuck. And they completely made my blood boil. Their attitudes, the way they thought they knew better than everybody else, just because they came from a good family or because they got a degree from one of the Russell Group universities or something. And the epitome of that was I went to Margaret Thatcher's funeral. I stood on the pavement by St. Paul's, and I don't know if you know the Freedom Association.
Yeah, Freedom Association. Yeah, I used to go to their meetings.
Yep. Well, they organised, a reception at a pub near St. Paul's, and I went there, and I met a lot of Tories there, and I met these young Tories, in their early 20s, and they were telling me, okay, they respected Margaret Thatcher, that's why we're there, but they were exuding this sense of being owners of a society, they were boasting about becoming an MP in a few years. I thought, you little tosser, you've got no life experience. You speak like you've got lots of servants in your house and you don't know how society works. You don't know about the working class or the lower middle class. And you got people like that. These people reminded me of Osborne, this arrogant sense of, what do you call it?
Entitlement.
Yes, sorry. Yeah. And that that side of the Tory party, and I'm sure it exists in the other parties as well, just quite disgusted me.
Yeah, because really nobody should be an MP if they're under 30.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Hitler actually said that, and he
Oh,
said,
for God's sake, Claire!
don't even
Oh
think
my
of having
God!
a political view until.
Okay,
But
don't
he
bring.
did
Look,
say
if
a
you're going
few
to bring in
sensible
Hitler,
things.
I'm going to ask you, why the hell? Do you mind me saying this?
Not at all.
Why the hell did you put on your list? Because before you emailed me this link, I looked at your profile on Blogger, what it's called, Blogspot,
Hmm.
and
My
one of your
favorite
favorite
book,
books.
Mein Kampf and the
Yeah,
Quran.
why? Why?
It's a good book. I really highly recommend people read it, because he did say quite perceptive things about democracy. It wasn't really what he said about Jews. I mean, I think the worst thing he said about Jews is that if they all got gassed, I wouldn't care. I think that was the worst thing he ever said about them. But what he said about democracy and how he observed democracy when he was in Vienna was just telling. He said these people don't know anything. They
But didn't he grow up in
I'm
the
going to send you a
Austro-Hungarian
video
Empire?
of me reading that bit of the book, and it still applies to us even now. That the people who push through these policies are hidden in the darkness, and they get away with it because whoever was responsible for it will be somewhere in the majority that pushed the proposal through. Whatever
Well,
it was, I mean, such as gay marriage or whatever that was sort of,
that's Samantha
completely
Cameron's idea,
pointless.
apparently. Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't know who pushed it through. I mean, I think it was pushed through by the Americans, who were the ones kind of making the world go gay. But obviously, the evidence is not to hand. But it is a culture that a worldview that is somehow to do with environmentalism, which is hating humans for polluting the earth with their presence and justifying having fewer people, this anti-natalism movement. And the thing is, this is what happens to your country if you don't have enough people to replace the ones that are going to go. You will have every generation your your population halved, and this will cause social problems requiring the cheap and easy solution of immigration, and this will upset the balance of your society. And now people refuse to admit that that was a problem. Low birth rate, the pill. It's actually linked. If you look at there's actually a Guardian article in the Guardian. Sorry, in the Guardian about Japan, and saying the reason why Japan is suffering from a declining birth rate is linked to the pill. So that's why their schools are closing down, because not enough people, they're worried about who's going to look after the elderly, and they're thinking of hiring foreign workers. I mean, they're not going to invite anybody brown in, but they will be Filipino or Chinese or whatever. So at least they look at like the host population, but they're kind of in trouble too. And this is what happens when you give the pill to women. They'll go to the most attractive men, leaving the not so attractive men out of the game, and this demoralizes them, and they become what they call herbivores, grass eaters, who
Yes, but
aren't
there's an
interested
equal
in
number
women,
of
and this will cause further decline in birth rates, etc.
yeah, but Claire, there's an equal number of men to women, so surely eventually majority of women and men would find a partner. They're not all. You're not going to have all these
Only
beta
if the
males
rules
left.
of marriage of monogamy are enforced, because the women will just go for the most attractive men, right? And in fact, they don't even mind polygamy, because what women will do is they will, they would rather share the alpha male than marry somebody that they consider beneath them.
Well, do you know that from women you know? Do you feel like that?
I do feel like that, yes.
So you would share an alpha male?
Yes. And
Really?
how Yeah, I think so. Okay,
So you don't mind if I'm not going to inquire into your private life, but we're talking sort of theoretically. But you'd be happy to be with an alpha male while he was having sex with another woman, having a relationship with another woman.
yes, yes, because you would think. I mean, I'm thinking of the lioness view of the world, and lionesses are part of the harem of the lion, and what they do is, I guess they put up with it, and when another male fights the father of their cubs, they never intervene because they know that whoever wins, they will they will have the cubs of the victorious lion rather than the vanquished lion, because they know that whoever wins, if the usurping male wins, they know that
Okay,
their
you're
cubs will be
talking
killed.
about primitive animal instinct.
Yeah, but I'm saying,
Surely, surely
females do not want
in a
to.
sophisticated human society,
Yeah, but
such
then
behaviour is bad.
the reality is that this isn't just my idea. Hypergamy is something that incels complain about. That women want to mate upwards. They want a man above them in status and height and all kinds of things. Because women don't marry men shorter than they are, hardly ever, unless he's got something else other than height to offer them. So women will always want to look for a higher status male, and this
Yeah,
is
but
called
most women
female
don't.
hypergamy.
Yeah, but most women don't go outside of the marriage or
No,
the
I'm talking
relationship.
about polygamy. I'm not talking about having sex with somebody, not your husband, when you're supposed to be monogamous. I'm talking about women who willingly go into these situations, such as, well, I don't know, their harems, with sultans and emperors and that kind of thing, and women actually apply to join harems, right? If they're beautiful enough to be of interest to the sultan or the emperor or whatever, but they consider it to be an opportunity.
So
So,
if I was an alpha male, and I joined a dating website and said, "Hello there, I'm an alpha male. Here are my alpha male credentials. I'm already married. I want a woman to join my harem." Do you think that would work?
well, you just have to seem an alpha male, and you might not have to mention anything. I wouldn't, advise you to mention any of these things, but an alpha male is not. I guess he would have alpha male qualities. He would have to sound like an alpha male, and this is a kind of, well, that something that is hard to put your finger on for men. I think he would have this sort of charisma that other males would also acknowledge, because one of the problems that John Major had was because he was so obviously a beta male. He never had any authority. He was always convinced, complaining about the bastards in his cabinet because they
Yeah.
wouldn't listen to him because, they thought he was, well, who was he until Maggie put him there before she left to stop him from, to stop Heseltine from getting the job. So he never had any authority. That he was just constantly mocked, and yeah. But we know just by John Major, and his entire persona and story, that he wasn't up to the job of being alpha male. And the thing is, no beta male will ever accept the authority of another beta male. And that is another, fact of, well, a law of human nature. And I can't even begin to describe it, but women instinctively know who is alpha and who is beta. I mean, sometimes they actually prefer to marry later, to have a quiet life, to be in a stable relationship. They do have, well, in the olden days anyway, they would be advised by their mothers about, trying to find out, which would be more suitable for them in the end. When the daughters wouldn't even know their own minds. And yes, and the whole thing about monogamy is that everybody has to choose, and they can only choose once. even alpha males. But obviously an alpha male would have, a greater choice of women because he can choose, more beautiful women, who are more feminine, i.e. Sweet and submissive, and because that I guess is what most men want from women. Somebody who looks well, arm candy, who doesn't talk back, and who will be a good mother to his children, and supportive and loyal, blah blah blah.
Are you arm candy, and do you not talk back to your husband?
I'm afraid I do talk back too much, but
That's good. That's good.
But some men, are prepared to put up with it, or if you rein it in, before, there's a lot of being on best behavior during courtship and that kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, eventually, we will turn. We will become boring and irritating and fat and whatever, and
men also, yeah.
Yes, and in the end you think, oh well, better the devil we know, because no one's going to have us now, us with our children and bad habits and whatever.
Anyway, we've really wandered off the main topic.
We have, but I think it really is fundamentally all this is about gender relations, and before you go, I really think this idea of yin and yang, which is actually a Chinese idea, is kind of saying that it all is about gender relations and the laws regulating relations between the sexes, and if you get that right, everything will turn out right again. And which is why feminism.
I don't believe your theocratic, single party, authoritarian, dictatorial, secular Koranic state will help that. Well, it will do it, but it also bring lots of evils. I think how we can achieve what you and I both agree on is having equality of the sexes, not allowing vindictive women to ruin a family because they want to take their revenge on the husband and punish him by not letting him see his children and take half of his salary without letting him live in a marital home and things like that. We can change the laws to do that.
Yes, but what a revolution would be required to even talk about this. I mean, I've tried talking to the only man with an anti-feminist political party, Mike Buchanan, and he won't do it. He won't even talk about abolishing no-fault divorce, and that's because most men who if they can get sex before marriage, they're not that bothered about abolishing no-fault divorce, and they won't even go that far. But I'm saying fundamentally, if you're going to get things right again, you do have to abolish no-fault divorce. You have to admit it was a mistake to even begin this sort of thing.
But not only that, but the rights that women have in the marital dispute is excessive compared to the man's.
Yes, and that's why men won't marry, which creates a vicious circle.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And I think that's a real crime in society brought in by the so-called quote mark progressives.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're aware that Jamaica has an illegitimacy rate of 86%.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I'm sure that's not shared in the other Caribbean islands.
Well, high crime societies would have a very high illegitimacy rate, and I don't remember. I don't know if you remember David Starkey, who's been cancelled, saying during the London riots of 2011, saying, "Ooh, the whites have turned black." You remember him saying that? I thought,
no,
wow.
I don't.
Okay. Well, you can still find it, Guardian reports of him saying that. But I thought that was pretty edgy. But anyway, now he's been cancelled. But he did say a true thing. So But I'm saying, this is what we should concentrate on rather than, I'm not even blaming women really. It's like, people just do whatever the law allows them to. It's not against the law, is it? And you have to say, well, no, it isn't, and the law's wrong. Oh yeah, we always knew that the law was an ass, but anyway, there's no law against this thing, which is why all political activism is about changing laws, which sounds a bit cold, but I'm just trying to explain the situation. I mean, just to emphasize that it can be fixed, but only if people talk about it in the right way. And for too long, perhaps, people who identify themselves as nationalists have to blame Jews and particular groups for their bad government, and this kind of makes them vulnerable to being demonized. And we know that the working classes are, I guess they're more racist than the middle classes who have the education to dance around words. So that is their problem. And of course, it's the working classes who are most affected by immigration and who complain the loudest in the most, maybe
They
insulting.
complain the loudest, but they're ignored by all three political parties.
Yes, because the Labour Party. I know they were having a debate ages ago about how the Labour Party has been taken over by not so much working men, but celebrities, champagne socialist types, and even then they were saying, we don't want that.
Eddie Izzard, well, all of the New Labour, like Blair, Mandelson, they're all middle class people. Eddie Izzard is the latest admission to the pop celebrity ranks of New Labour, or Labour rather.
Well, the thing is, for the Labour Party, it's not just, it's not the entire working class. It's only the aristocracy of Labour, unionised Labour. If you're not unionised, they don't care about you, do they?
Very few people are unionised. It's only mostly the public
exactly.
sector.
Yes. So only a certain section of the so-called working class get represented, and the others just fall into, finding, letting UKIP and the BNP, when it was still active, represent their interests, and it's easy to demonise them. Because all the media have to do is say, oh, look at this person, look at the way he looks, look at the way he dresses, look at the way he speaks, he's stupid, and he said this racist, anti-Semitic thing, and that's the end of it, right? So
Claire, we really wandered off topic a huge amount here. Have I missed any of your definitions of your secular Koranism? Is there something you haven't told me yet, or have I understood all of it from what we've discussed today?
Well, there is so much law. I mean, somebody just asked me, "Oh, tell me all the laws of the Quran," and I thought, that's such a bad question. But I'm sure there will be more things. I hope.
Well, I would ask that. I'm sorry, but I'm going to ask that same bad question. Can you direct me to a succinct list of all the laws that will be brought in under this regime?
All right, one-party state, 20% flat rate income tax, the abolition of usury, the treating of unmarried parents as sex offenders.
Whoa! Oh yeah, I forgot about that bit. I'm an unmarried parent, so
I know, but don't worry about it, because I won't be imposing retrospective legislation.
I'm not worried about myself. I'm just worried about people like me in the future who'd become in the same situation as me, i.e., I didn't marry because I knew the laws would be hostile to me with regards to care of the kids, access to the kids, if I was married.
Yes. So, but anyway,
that's one of the main reasons why I didn't marry. And I think a lot of men are like that. And under your Quranic state, I don't think we should be punished for thinking like that.
No, but I do say to men, I actually do say to men, it's not safe for you to marry until the abolition of no-fault divorce. I do tell people, even now. And so obviously the bargain would be, once no-fault divorce is abolished, you can have marriage. You will have marriage as a contract, which means that divorce is breach of contract, so the fault will be implied. in a divorce, and fault always begins at 50-50, because at the very least you married the wrong person. So it's something to take seriously, and the law will support married parents and actually raise their status, because that is what I think is a problem. The status of married parents is supposed to be equal to that of civil partnerships, gay couples, unmarried parents. But no, if you're doing the hardest job of all, you should be higher status than all the others, right? So married parents would be privileged, and unmarried parents would be treated as sex offenders. But I won't be using, please don't think, obviously nobody is going to be retrospectively punished.
No, I'm not worried
The point
about
has to be made. I'm sorry it offends
I'll stand
you.
my ground and tell you you're wrong, and I'll defy you and anybody else who try and declare me as a sex offender, because I was a single. I was an unmarried parent of my 2 children, but I brought them up till they reached their adulthood. I was there all the time.
Yes.
And I understand the justification for your this one part of your policy. The justification for it, I understand, is the harm that out of control single parent families cause to society and to themselves. I understand that's what's driving you, but of course there's a large number, and it's too high a number, of out of control single parent families. I agree with you there, but there are also a huge number of in control single parent unmarried families. Unmarried families and single parent families that are working okay. And they shouldn't be punished for the crimes of the other extreme end of the spectrum. That's my feeling.
And I agree, but there has to be some sort of rule so people are clear about it. Otherwise, it's like, it's okay for me because it's okay for this celebrity to have unmarried, children out of wedlock. Because if the people at the top are doing this, that they're actually doing more harm than their next door neighbor doing it, right? Because people kind of look up to celebrities, and and the law needs to be clear. And I don't think it is. It's like you get away with it if you get away with it, if you're pretty or cool enough or whatever.
I still think it's harsh, and yeah, I think it's a harsh law, but I definitely think we could have laws that discourage people from becoming single parents, or getting easy divorce, as you say. But I think we can have laws to do that. But I think your proposals, your secular Quranic proposals, are too harsh for a lot of people, including me, to accept. I'm just saying that. Okay.
I totally understand, but I was thinking a way of mitigating this to kind of put people on the list of, I don't know, penitent unmarried parents, so that they have a sort of category of honor, like, oh well, I would have done it. I see what the problem is now. I'm still a secular Koranist, even though I'm an unmarried parent. That kind of thing, and I'm one of the first.
Can I just say,
that kind of thing.
This attitude of yours, you're reiterating this similar theme where you want to shame people, and I think we don't need to shame people. We just need to tell people, look, these are the new laws.
Tim, it's cheap. It's cheap, isn't it? Shaming people. It's cheap.
But I mean, you can only shame people if there's a collective morality that people feel shamed by. And
it's easy to establish, though. It's easy to establish.
Well, only by diktat and
no, you can
theocratic
through the BBC. It's like cooperating.
You're right.
Tell a few stories.
But that's wrong. See, you're trying to establish what the BBC have been doing for decades, which has established this ghastly metropolitan left-wing quasi-morality, which is steeped in, pseudo-Marxism and stuff, and it's just destroying our society, all these ridiculous attitudes that they promote. But I don't want to repeat that. I want us to have a society where we don't have some stupid nannying upper middle class, left leaning entity like the BBC and all the establishment telling us how we should behave, giving us nannying, nudge rules, and all that rubbish. I want us to live free lives without a nannying authoritarian overlord. I want to have a minimum government where we don't even know who the Prime Minister is, which is similar to what Switzerland has. I want us to have a minimum government that does not interfere in our lives. We already have most of the laws that we need. In fact, we should get rid of half of our laws because most of them are unnecessary. We should just carry on in automatic mode. We don't need a government interfering and making major decisions unless we're invaded or something like that, or some major, disaster like that. But unless that happens, be like Switzerland, where hardly anything happens and the people decide what laws are passed through referenda. And the politicians take the back seat. That's what I want to see.
I suppose the problem is that you don't have the divine authority of the Quran, so somebody else will have a different wish list. And I'm saying, I'm going to use that book because people have heard of it, and it does.
Claire, why not use a combination of the Ten Commandments and a New Testament? Why not use that?
Well, the New Testament has no rules that are stated clearly, and it will drive you crazy if you try to read it, because it's all, it doesn't say anything clearly, and it's written by different people. So that is a problem, and the Torah and the Quran are actually supposed to be the word of God, so it has greater authority, and that's why
surely you don't believe that the Quran was written by God. I mean, do you believe in God?
I'm agnostic. I do see the utility of a hypothetical supreme authority, if only to order our thoughts and priorities. And I think deep down we all want to believe in God because it would be great if he existed, and so there is an element of wishful thinking, and I think there is a moral imperative for us to behave as if we believed in God. To make the world a better place.
Interesting. I mean, I'm agnostic.
Me too.
I don't, I've got no evidence to believe either way. I don't think there is I'm very numerate and scientific based in my upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
And, that part of my mind tells me it's very unlikely there's this supreme creator, but, I'll just keep a tiny part of my mind open just in case there is, but I really don't think there is.
Well, the thing is, the only arguments in favor or against, because, the nature of the Abrahamic God is that, he's not like anything, and he won't appear in material form. I mean, that is a belief anyway. So if he wants to do something for us, he has to send Holy Spirit to, I don't know, cause earthquakes and perform miracles or whatever, get Mary pregnant and that kind of thing. So will always be arguments of saying, oh, it's just natural phenomena. It's coincidence or whatever. So really, at the end of the day, we are still stuck with this problem of this 50-50 situation when we have to choose to believe or not believe. And obviously, choosing to believe would be a moral and political decision. And in a way, that makes it easy because it's like, well, obviously, if you don't want to obey, then of course you won't want to believe in God, because otherwise you think you're going to be punished, for every little thing that you do. But if you believe, your society will be more orderly. You are contributing to its longevity by affirming and maintaining the rule of law. And
you say the rule of law, you mean the rule of the religious law according to whatever religious book you're following?
Well, you talk about it by referring to the Ten Commandments. What is the Ten Commandments but religiously sourced?
Yep. No, but that was just a tiny microscopic part of the Bible. It was 10 lines of rules, which were succinct. They didn't dictate that you must your women must cover themselves, the hijabs and all that kind of malarkey. Yeah, I know that's not literally in the Quran, but you know what I'm trying to get at.
Hmm.
There were succinct, simple, basic humanitarian laws. You know, don't kill anybody, don't steal, don't covet your neighbour's wife. To
Don't
be fair,
envy.
yeah,
Don't
and
envy
well,
your
to be fair, there
neighbour.
should also be don't covet your neighbour's husband as well. But anyway, um, I'm not a feminist, by the way, but I think any rule for a man for a woman should also apply to a man, and vice versa. But anyway, getting
I think
distracted.
it's implicit anyway.
No, well, yeah, I disagree. Obviously, it was a male-dominated society then when the Old Testament was written, so they didn't care about the rights of women. Again, I'm not a feminist. I'm not a lefty. I'm
Hmm.
just saying it. Okay.
No, that's fine. I think people. I mean, what you said about gender equality, I don't think it can be equal because men and women are you know they're not completely the same. So it would be
Of course,
unto
yeah, of
us
course.
really to make them subject to the same laws.
Yeah. Well, no, I think men and women should be subject to the same laws. Of course, we have different qualities and attributes that make us different. Of course, we're different, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that a woman should, be forced to obey a law that a man doesn't have to. Or especially with regard to your Quranic thing about slapping a woman on the wrist or beating her if she misbehaves. Well, the woman should have the same right over the man. Anyway, we've already discussed this. We're going over old territory. So, is there anything in your Quranic, um, secular Quranic regime that we've missed out on?
I gave you a list of things that would happen. I can't think of anything more off the top. Legal brothels, did I mention that?
Sorry, legal what?
Licensed brothels, you'd have that.
License bottle, did you say?
Licensed brothels,
Oh, for God's sake.
brothels. Yes,
So basically, you agree with a government run brothel so that men can release their lust. Is that what you're saying?
yes, because it might be a cause for social instability. Because I think a lot of wars and terrorism are caused by, and, and mass murder is caused by um, men, sexually frustrated men.
I don't know where to start about completely disagreeing with that statement. Um, there will always be men who don't have a girlfriend or can't find a girlfriend, but
Hmm.
most of those men will probably go to a normal prostitute, or they'll just keep their own ice, you know, remain by themselves and not go around causing wars or terrorist acts. Do you think there's any proof? Can you cite any proof that a lack of a government-run brothel um, increases the likelihood of violence and terrorism?
I'm saying a lot of the energy of young men is recruited in the army, and with the, I guess, the promise of booty and women. I mean,
Not the British Army.
that
The British
hmm?
Army doesn't say you can get a woman if you join the army, surely.
No, of course not. I mean, they won't say that, but I think it's kind of implicit in the whole thing.
I disagree. I don't know where you get that idea from.
Don't women tend to find soldiers masculine and interesting in
Yeah,
that way?
that's the other. That's going from the other.
Uniform and that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
that's going from the other direction. That's not saying that men joining the army think they're going to join the army because they can get a free shag from a woman or something.
I don't know. I mean, why do people join the army? They will join for a range of reasons, and when they join, they think that maybe their uniform would get them more feminine interest than not wearing a uniform. I don't know.
Or
I mean,
maybe
of
they
course,
join because they're patriotic. Maybe they join because they love that roughy, tufty outdoor life. Um,
it could be that.
I mean, my two boys joined the air cadets and they had a fantastic time just doing these outdoory kind of military things, camping outside, long marches, and they really enjoyed it. And they weren't
Mhm.
doing it for girls or women. They did it because they thought it was good, roughy, tufty man fun. It's a man fun kind of thing, which
Mhm. Mhm.
I suspect,
Outdoors and that sort of thing.
yeah,
Um,
and
I,
and, and
I,
confronting yourself against real physical obstacles on the outside, and you're proving that you can survive on the outside as a man. I think that
women
goes
women
quite
rather
deep into the
admire
core of
that,
being a
don't
man.
they?
Sorry,
You know,
Claire.
women rather admire, men who are fit and, you know, than weedy men who work in offices and wear glasses. And um, I think a lot of the lot of unspoken assumptions. I think.
Hmm. Well, sorry, I'm not convinced, but
I don't know. I mean, obviously, you can't speak for. Well, I can't speak for any man, but I'm just saying that reading what I do from novels and movies and whatever, there's a certain perception of a soldier that maybe can be romanticized for the man as well as the woman.
I don't know.
Officer and a Gentleman. Maybe that's an old
Oh, come
movie.
on, that's a completely
I
ridiculous.
don't know. I mean,
That's a
it's
ridiculous
popular.
comparison to make. No, yeah, I mean that's ridiculous example to establish as the dynamics of men joining the army because they think they're going to get a woman or whatever. But
Pirates of the Caribbean, buccaneering. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I guess in literature, these things are, you know, uh, romanticized.
I think they are, and I think you'll find that most people in the army are usually working class, and they probably join because they like being macho blokes, or they like the outdoors, or they want to have a safe job, and they like physical activity.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if the guiding, you know, um, cause for them is because they think they're going to get free women. I don't
Or
think.
women taking more of an interest in them because of their uniform. I'm sure they wouldn't, admit to that. But women do find these uniforms, well,
Oh, I know women do.
attractive.
Yeah, yeah, I know that. Yeah, yeah, that I agree with you. But I don't think most men join the army just because they think women find them attractive. I think it's bloody hard work being in the army. It's easy to be chucked out because if you're physically, not up to par and stuff.
Hmm.
So it's a commitment you make, and okay, I'm not a good example of a man, but if I was to have joined the army, and I might have been tempted when I was very young, um, I would have joined it because I wanted to do something challenging, physical, uh, stand up for my country, learn new skills, be
Hmm.
part of a big organization that does very impressive things. I mean,
Hmm.
when the army does something, like building a temporary bridge or whatever, or whenever there's a disaster and they're roped in to help people in floods and famines and stuff, I mean, they're very impressive. They're very well organized.
Hmm.
Um, that would be the reason why I, as a man, would have joined, not
Hmm.
because I knew I'd get loads of birds flocking to me.
But if you had a successful army career, then you would feel kind of more entitled to feminine interest than
No, I wouldn't,
somebody.
because I feel entitled to feminine interests right now because I feel that I've accomplished many good things in my life
Hmm.
that weren't related to the military.
Hmm. And and how do you find women now between the time when you were courting your wife with the women now? Are they
I haven't dated
easier to get
anybody.
on with?
I haven't dated anybody for about 3 years, but the last time I dated, I got on well, but it didn't work out. But yeah,
Yeah, they say that both sides are maybe too fussy about, because the whole idea of dating apps and websites is that, there's somebody waiting for you just around the corner. You
Oh
just
no, that's
need to
rubbish.
keep going,
That's
that kind
absolutely
of thing.
rubbish. Yeah. Well, obviously, I take it you're happily married and you haven't had to use a dating site, but yeah, I've had to a couple of times in recent years, and yeah, it's very difficult. I met one very nice lady, and we did get on very well, but it wasn't quite right. But yeah, many of the others, yeah, it's yeah. Well, I suppose that's life, really, isn't it? They just weren't right.
Well, yeah. I mean, I started a dating website, but it wasn't obviously a dating website because I thought, if people, mature people, they didn't want, all the sort of, weekends away and pink and fluffy stuff. And I thought, I'm going to match these people up with their political affiliations. So, you'll just know the worst of the other person and be, decide whether you're going to put up with them or not. And you can meet them through, my website called One Party for All. And then I found to my dismay that, women just wouldn't come to it because they hated all the men who expressed those, terrible views.
Is it not the case that most women would reject that because they don't want to get involved in politics? They just want to get on with being friendly with someone rather than discuss politics. Do you not feel that's the case?
Yes, but I suppose for me, I just don't think I could ever connect with a man if I did not share some of his, most important political views.
Hmm.
Because, I just wouldn't be able to trust somebody whose, morality would be so divergent from mine, I guess. So, and I think I'm not the only one, which is why, a lot of women are so censorious when they discover a man has, said the wrong word or something, because, that it makes them think, oh, he must be evil, insane, bad news. I'm not going to have anything to do with him. So, so that makes it difficult for men, and then they have to hide their views, and that would tend to marginalize them. So it's for this reason that I think men should have greater authority. So they can say what they want, and and argue with each other about the rightness or wrongness of it, rather than self-censor themselves in order to get a woman, which I think is.
I'm sure, actually, Claire, I'm sure women do the same. I'm sure there are a lot of women who, in a similar political arena that you and I are, who feel the same, maybe.
Well, actually, I was talking to this was some years ago, and that was when Trump was still president, and I was talking to actually this man who I knew from the BNP, and I was saying, maybe if we were courting, I would have to pretend I cared about, these, these children who were separated from their mothers who were illegal migrants in the United States. I would have to pretend I cared. And you, if you were courting me, would have to pretend that you cared, but actually we don't care, And
Actually, actually, I wouldn't pretend. I would say, sorry, it's terrible what the children are going through. The authorities are looking after the children. It's a parent's fault for letting the children arrive there.
Yes, I mean that would be the position I would take. You see, but the leftist
And
position would
obviously,
be.
that's why I'm single.
Well, yes. I mean, it will be difficult for men if they don't restore the patriarchy, because instinctively you're saying a woman won't like me saying that, so I won't say it, and then it becomes unsayable, and then it'll become even more unsayable as time passes, until anybody overhearing our conversation will say, if I tell this to this new woman you're interested in, she will cancel you. So. And of course, a lot of women can't be reasoned with. I mean, they just don't want to talk about politics because they think it's them losing the argument. They will take it personally. It'll upset them that they can't, because actually I knew a female friend who said, I was at this dinner party and I said something about Israel, and they came down on me like a ton of bricks. I will never, discuss politics again, because she found it a personal insult.
Yeah.
That people disagreed with her about her views on Israel, and she's a very kind lady. So, but the thing about these things is that people unconsciously want to assert status over each other, and it's like a childish thing. It's like, you said the wrong word, and because you said the wrong word, I'm higher status than you
Well,
because
Claire,
I knew not to say the wrong word.
Claire, I disagree with that. That may be your experience, but my experience, my life experience, is that I don't believe that. I don't believe I'm trying to assert myself over someone else. For instance, my workplace. I'm not trying to assert myself. I'll just say, hey, chaps, I've got this idea. If you like it, to make this software, I'm a software developer, to make this software work, then fine. If not, give me your reasons why not, and we'll discuss it. I'm not trying to assert myself over anybody.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about this kind of workplace thing. I'm saying, when you talk about politics or anything that might be linked to saying anything controversial, people, the people around you will try and say, oh, did he say something really terrible? What was it? And I just, they will kind of stick their oar in, won't they? Children do that. Children do that to each other about, each other's beliefs. Do you still believe in fairies? Do you still believe in Santa? You're stupid.
I haven't heard those conversations, to be honest.
Okay.
I knew when my children realised Father Christmas didn't exist. Sorry, Claire, Father Christmas doesn't exist. Sorry to ruin your life, but yeah, but I don't remember my kids arguing about things like that. They just eventually realise by just human experience that, oh, all that Father Christmas thing is a bunch of baloney, but hey, it was fun. And he doesn't exist,
Mm-hmm.
We weren't arguing about it.
But haven't you seen the reports in yeah, apparently one teacher, it was either in the UK or in the US, and the teacher said Father Christmas doesn't exist, and the parents were so angry with them.
Well, yeah, I'd be a bit cheesed off because I'd like my children to have found out he didn't exist by natural processes rather than have an idiot teacher telling them he doesn't exist. I'd be upset with him because it's part of their childhood. Let them have their little hopes and their little happinesses as children.
Mm-hmm.
This is another reason why I absolutely despise the recent governments. I think it started with Cameron, or was it Blair, where they're teaching primary school children about sex and gender. It's just completely wrong. Children up to the age of 11 should be happy, carefree children, not having a care about what sex or gender is. Just let them live their happy lives.
Don't put ideas in their heads.
I would say that is a sex crime, forcing sex education on underage children. And I'd raise that age up to maybe 14 or 15. Because, I emailed you before. The statistics show that having sex education in British schools, in the secondary schools, has not diminished underage pregnancies. So it's not doing any good. So let everyone cancel it. Let the parents do the job of being a parent and teach their children at the appropriate age about the pitfalls and whatever of sex.
Yes.
Well, we've been running for 2 hours now.
Not bad, huh? For the 10 minutes you said.
Yeah.
But
and I'm going to be sacked if I don't get back to work.
All right. But thank you for well, we didn't even need to talk about gender relations, but I think it will keep coming up, and this is the aspect of secular Koranism I want to emphasize. that it has something for everyone, male and female.
But as you probably realise, I'm not won over by secular Koranism. I'm also concerned that there's no way you can convince many people of supporting it, Claire. You know that, don't you?
I understand. Because it's entirely against the cult. It is the antithesis of matriarchy and sexual
Yes, but
liberation.
the matriarchy that you express it more strongly than I would. There is, I would say, there's a degree of matriarchy. I wouldn't say there is a de facto definitive matriarchy. We've got huge stratas of our upper establishment who have become feminized. I agree, but I wouldn't call that a matriarchy because we're not ruled by women. We're not ruled by a council or a government of women. We're ruled by men who are a bunch of wusses. So I would agree with you in that respect, but in trying to rectify that and make it more a fair balance between matriarchal and patriarchal influences, I think we can achieve it by other ways than having a secular Quranic authoritarian dictatorial state.
Okay. So next time you'll tell us how you're going to achieve your libertarian state.
All right,
And
funny.
I look forward to it.
Well, if I do come up with a solution, well, I've already told you the Swiss solution, and just removing those laws that give women too much power over men. That is my solution, rather than a single party religious state or semi-religious state.
But we know about these libertarians and how they can't organize a piss up in a brewery. I mean, that is their
Yeah,
problem.
I'm libertarian. I have a libertarian tendencies. I'm not an absolute libertarian. I don't believe in absolute zero government. That's what an extreme libertarian would want. I believe in a libertarian influence, which is reducing the amount of government to free up more people's lives, more of their taxes that they can spend themselves rather than support an expensive, overbearing, unnecessary, governmental bureaucracy. Surely you
Right.
would agree with that.
Well, the Quran could be interpreted to impose a 20% flat rate income tax.
Yes, but
So
at the cost of all this religious malarkey and women being beaten and all that stuff. And not a single party,
slapped on the wrist. Slapped
single
on the
party
wrist.
state, single party state. Sorry, it's a no go for people like me, Claire.
All right. All right.
I've taken so much of your time. I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's been really, really interesting. I think we're
Okay.
going to agree to disagree, or unless you think you have a more powerful argument for me, or
I suppose that the powerful argument would be if people are desperate enough, I guess, only if they're desperate enough would they adopt my solution. And I think there is scope for things getting worse. And I don't want to be, seen to be some kind of accelerationist. But I suppose that really is the only thing to make people sit up and take notice that things are not what they should be and must be fixed ASAP. And
okay,
I do.
may I make this proposal, Claire?
Mhm.
Remove the religious aspect of your proposed state, make it multi-party, make it democratic, properly democratic, bring in a Swiss-style democracy, and just bring in laws that repair the parity between males and females having power over their lives, especially with regards to divorces and access to children. I think
Well,
that
that
would
would
be.
be marriage. Marriage is the pivot upon which true gender justice rests.
I disagree. I think a lot of people are unmarried and have successful relationships where the children are cared for and there's no divorce. Yeah, of course, there's a lot of unmarried single parent families where the children get into trouble and they cause problems. I agree with that. But I think there's still a large proportion of society where they're not married and the children are brought up successfully in a loving family
Yes.
home.
But we must legislate for the majority rather than the minority. And I think that I think is really the rule.
Mhm.
We have to kind of make sure most people do this desirable thing. rather than pick up the pieces for people who cannot
I
or will
agree. I
not.
agree, and I think we could do that by just changing the benefit system to punish, those mothers who want to have baby after baby for the benefits, and just say, look, you have another baby, it goes to an orphanage. We're not going to give you benefits.
It's
Anyway.
just quicker to lash them 100 times, so everybody who
Oh my
sees
God,
it gets a
Claire,
message.
no, that's too extreme. That's wrong. God's teeth. You're terrible. You're a terrible woman.
I know. I just want it to work. I don't want to faff around and spend years trying to do this thing that I'm not even going to get. I mean, I know they're not going to give us even the little thing that you ask. They're not even going to do it. So you might as well just ask for the thing you want and watch them have fits of the vapors and, roll on the floor in agony and disbelief that you ever suggested such a thing. You might as well. Because they're not even going to give you the little that you ask for, You already know.
Yeah, I know, but they're not going to give you what you want either.
No, but at least I'll have fun, watching them have shit fits all over the place,
Oh, you're terrible. But I do enjoy talking to you so much.
Well, please come again if you have anything on your mind, and I have enjoyed our conversation
Actually,
too.
I've got this pain in my left foot. Can you talk to me about that, please?
What do you think it is? This pain in your
I'm
left
joking.
foot?
I'm winding up.
It could be sciatica.
I am joking. Look, Claire, thank you very much. Really interesting talk. And please get in touch again.
All right. And please do come back on when you have anything else you'd like to discuss. Thank you, Tim.
Well, thank you, Claire. And take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Nothing in the chat worth responding to. Thank you all for listening to 2 hours of conversation discussing mostly gender justice.